So day 2 of Global Soccer E-Conclave, last session, Spotlight. We would like to officially address two renowned personalities. One at present is with us from Germany, and another one is at present from Texas. Leslie, you are at present at Texas. The audience is there. So we are starting the spotlight segment. We will start first with Arunava Chaudhary, a renowned person in the field of football, not only for India. He is also associated with the football development of Germany as well as the Caribbean part. Also part of Indian ISL teams as well as Indian football activities and national teams. So in this spotlight segment, I will request first Arunavo to give an overview how, as an expert in the field, you feel that the pandemic, the present, has affected the football and will affect in future.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you, first of all, for having me as part of the Global Soccer E-Conclave. Normally, I guess we would have met somewhere in a conference hall and would have discussed this face to face, but this is not possible because of the pandemic. And that brings me to the game of football and to the problems that we are facing globally, not only in football, but I think sports in general, professional sports, to be very precise, in trying to find solutions on how to continue with sports. The example here in Germany has been, of course, that the Bundesliga was the first big professional league to restart the system with a very, very detailed and minute hygiene plan, trying to ensure that standards are met. And Germany has very, very high standards in hygiene and in general, and that is shown in the pandemic as well, that the medical system is not that bad. And I guess that has helped also the Bundesliga to prepare for all of this. And the good thing is, of course, on the other side, that the infrastructure of most football clubs is not that very old. Most venues have come up in the last decade. Some of them are a little older, who were there for the 2006 FIFA World Cup. So the infrastructure is there, but again, even with that given infrastructure, you have the issues and the problems of social distancing, which depending on definition is between 1.5 meters to 2 meters. Here in Germany, we mainly use the rule of 1.5 meters, which is about 5 feet, and that has worked. But if you look at how the pandemic is going to influence the game of football, the biggest problem is how do you and when do you get spectators back into the venues? I think that is the biggest problem, the biggest issue that you'll have after asking the questions of when and how do you restart the leagues. And one topic that will most probably crop up despite all of these tests happening in the other big leagues is, will in England, will in Spain, will in Italy be able to follow the Germans when it comes to social distancing and hygiene rules? Because the general numbers, if I look at Madrid, if I look at match 0 in the UEFA Champions League between Atalanta Bergamo and FC Valencia, then I have doubts if these leagues will really be able to pull it through like the Bundesliga has done. And even in the Bundesliga, we've had issues. Jadon Sancho has been in the news for the right and the wrong reasons in the last week. Last week, of course, he was positively in the news for his shirt supporting George Floyd. Thereafter, he flew his barber in and got a haircut, and the barber posted the picture where everything that the hygiene rule stands for has been sort of thrown into the bins, and he was given a fine where the player afterwards even put out a sarcastic tweet. And he was not suspended. So the question is, how do you sort this out? And if I come to speak of the Indian concept of context, then the problem is for the All India Football Federation. If I just go back into March 14th, you had the final of the Indian Super League without fans in Goa. They somehow finished it. They were very, very lucky that was the weekend they were able to finish the league. The I-League didn't get finished. It had its derby in Kolkata on the 15th. Normally, I would have also been down there, would have been a co-commentator for the match, and would have been part in the biggest match of the Indian football calendar. That was cancelled. and suddenly everyone realized that this whole thing is much bigger than we all thought so. And if I honestly say, even in mid-February, I was talking about projects to do in March and April in India. I was supposed to do a project in the Caribbean in May. All of that changed very dramatically in those weeks in late Feb and early March. And you know, you had lockdowns. We in Germany, I will per se say, we did never had a lockdown. We had a shutdown because we were always allowed to go out to the supermarket, to the pharmacies, and also, you know, 1 hour or 2 hours of physical training outside, or, you know, if you have a dog, you were also allowed always out. So that way it depends on where you are in the world. And when I come back to the Indian context, again, you have the problem of the second division football league, where we had the situation that it was not finished, which means that you didn't get to the playoffs, and you couldn't decide on which team is going to get promoted to the I League. On the other side, you have the merger of ATK with Mohun Bagan, which means that a slot additionally is open in the league, which the FF has now announced that they're looking for an expansion franchise. The transfer window has been pushed back. It's not clear 100% when the transfer window will open, because it seems like that India is still to hit its peak when it comes to the pandemic. And that is going to be the question of how and when you restart your leagues. Even in Germany, you know, with all our given standards and what we've been able to achieve, at the end, the Bundesliga and the clubs will have to honestly say that the whole league was restarted for financial reasons. Even big clubs like FC Schalke 04, you know, who've been regulars in the Champions League, one of the clubs who's produced some brilliant talent over the decades, just to name a few: Manuel Neuer, Mesut Özil, Leroy Sané. If the Bundesliga season wasn't finished, they might have gone out of business.
Okay.
In an Indian context, that is a little different, because clubs are not dependent on television money, but they're dependent on sponsorship money, and that is going to be a global effect. I fear that that the one or the other company will think about sponsorship, about spending money on sports, on spending money on marketing in general, even on, let's say, social media, or, you know, on ads, on other things, because they will try to keep the money together to keep the system running. And that is a big danger for global sports, where a lot of sponsorship opportunities or, you know, conversations about sponsorships might not happen. International teams who are looking to travel as part of the International Champions Cup to the US, to Asia, to Australia. There was this big talk that Man United and East Bengal were talking about a match in Kolkata. All of these things are not going to happen. So that international connect, which was there in world football, and international connectivity, which was there in international football, that is one thing which is also breaking.
Okay.
So
okay, Aruna, we'll just go one by one. We got the first
sure.
correct. We got the first part correct. That obviously it is a big challenge in front of the football fraternity and soccer ecosystem. I myself a sports medicine doctor. I'm that's why before I go to Leslie, I'll just give a small input here. The novel coronavirus, we all know that the same variety of virus already has its effect across the globe. 2010, the SARS was there, and the practicality is that we are still not have the vaccine for that virus. And therefore, a lot of discussions are there that the vaccines are in the process. However, till the time it is not available, we cannot really say whether we get a vaccine or not, because to get a vaccine, it has to be viable economically as well as functionally. It has to give certain amount of prolonged window so that we can really say that it is effective against almost the same type of virus. We have not yet found the answer. So yes, the threat is there. So Leslie, I just introduce you for the fraternity here who are attending. You are a person who has started a unique thing at Africa, which is Africa's own soccer magazine. You are not only an entrepreneur, and now you have started your Africa Sports Venture Group. So how you see that the pandemic has actually affected Africa?
Well, thank you for that.
In terms of football, because we are talking here mainly on football, so we'll talk in terms of football, how it has affected Africa.
Yes, yes. Well, football, first of all, is the biggest sporting culture in Africa. It's the biggest sports discipline in Africa, and so the pandemic is hit at the very core of the social construct of sports. And sports being sports, like I said, it's the biggest social currency out there. So with this hitting at the core and taking people out of stadiums in Africa, this has been devastating because the dynamics of how sport is portrayed or projected in Africa is mostly from the stadiums themselves. You have very limited media exposure out there in Africa. So most people get to watch football. They get to watch football on TV, and mostly what they watch on TV is international content, either European sports or American sports or other foreign content. So you find limited availability of African football on TV across Africa. So which means that most of what you would have in the space in Africa in terms of football is you will have to go to a stadium to see a football match. And that being the case, and the fact that all kind of gathering has been suspended, all football activities have been suspended, it's hit at the very core. And we're talking in terms of not just that, but also the income generation for teams in this case, which is the income that most leagues and teams get in Africa comes from this stadium gate takings. Very limited advertising and sponsorship as well. So Africa, like most other places, but Africa in particular has been hit very hard, with this pandemic, given the fact that nobody gets to go to a stadium till further notice. We have a lot of people who are trying to advocate getting back, but it's very, very dangerous at a particular stage. What we want to look at is the safety issue, making sure that there's a vaccine or there's a medication that's available before folks are allowed back into stadiums. It's a very risky proposition, given also the fact that the healthcare system in Africa are mostly very fragile. So you don't have the potential of being able to contain a significant outbreak on the continent, in any country whatsoever. So it's risky. It's a risky proposition to try to get folks to return back to the stadiums in this case. So it's hit at the very core. We had our recent, the African Sports Ventures Group had the first Pan-African Sports conference online recently, back on the 24th and 25th of May. And President George Weah, former FIFA Player of the Year for 1995, who's president of Liberia now, did indicate that the pandemic's impact and effect is in its it's looking at the future. The recovery is going to be very bleak, given the dynamics of what's at play here, of what I've described in terms of the lack of media projection for sports in Africa, for football in Africa, as well as lack of a very low sponsorship footprint for most leagues and most teams in Africa. But now you look at what's there. It's only what they get from stadiums. And so with that being the case, it's been very, very devastating to say the least. And we hope that coming out of this, we can look at a lot of dynamics, look at a lot of things that can help to not only get leagues and teams back on good footing, but also that we look at how we're going to move forward and try to leverage other aspects to help with projecting football to the rest of not just the continent, but to the rest of the world. Because African football is exciting, it's interesting, and on so many levels. African football players come out and go overseas and they excel at many levels. And so we know there's a lot to be seen and gained from the African football space. And like I said, with football being the biggest sport on the continent, this is very significant, very, 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 very negative. extent.
Yeah. So once we understand the points from Leslie and Arunavo, we can understand, obviously, everyone is understanding the threat and the challenges in front of football. However, if we see the legacy of football, we can see even the World War has not even stopped the game. And even immediately after the World War, the game was like back like anything. So most probably the game has that resilience and the power that ultimately it will soak all the threats and the challenges and will overcome. So we just take a step ahead to Arunabo, who is associated with football development for India, and he's also part of many other events and activities. Football per se, we must understand that there are three activities: the grassroots, the youth, and the elite. And once we say the events and all these things, it is mainly for those 10% clubs or participants, but 90% is there in the grassroots and youth. So how you think that this segment will be affected, which is the base of the pyramid of football?
Massively.
Go
Massively.
ahead.
So, sorry, Leslie. The biggest problem, I guess, is with social distancing measures in place. I've seen this here in Germany 2-3 weeks ago when they restarted football, not only at the professional level, but they started football for amateur teams, for the academies, for the youth players. Try to explain a 7, 8, 9-year-old that your heroes in the Bundesliga are allowed to play a full contact sport, and you have to literally just pass the ball to your teammate with 3, sometimes even 4 meters of distance to ensure social distancing. You have to follow hygiene rules and regulations, which make it very, very difficult. But the bigger problem is they can get back into training. But what happens with competition? And I think that is the biggest problem that football around the world will have. If we, as you say, let's take the elite, let's take the professional game out. That will happen for commercial reasons around the world. And if anyone says anything else, they're lying. Let's be very clear about that. But if we get back to the point of grassroots, about youth football, about kids, baby leagues, and all of these things which happen around the world, that would be very, very difficult, because then you have to recreate the competitions. Are you able to recreate competitions? Are you able to recreate leagues? Which is a problem similar to what most probably will happen in education in general to kids. They might lose 3 months, 6 months, maybe even a whole year. So that is something which is going to be very, very difficult to solve, because as long as social distancing remains, football is a full contact sport, and that is actually a no-go in times of a pandemic like coronavirus, which we have at the moment.
Okay. So taking this cue ahead, I'll just request you, Leslie, how you see that the young generation, the grassroots or the youth groups at Africa will be affected. I just give a hint. Most of the activities in football in India, once we talk about youth development, is basically a predominantly a residential academy-based football in India. There is non-residential academy-based football also. There is a residential academy-based football. These residential academies are predominantly dependent on educational institutions. And these educational institutions at present are not in a situation to start, because as per medical study, once there is more than 20 people in a room, there is chance of infection spreading more.
Yeah. Well, first of all, we have a very I'll say, let's just call it like it is, a very poor youth sports, youth football section or space in Africa. From the very young to the youth level, from the grassroots to the youth level, it's not very developed. And so that is one of the things that we at African Sports Ventures Group are aiming to come into to help to develop, to boost. And when I when one of the initial contacts I had with Sports It Pro was looking at some of the dynamics of how to help to build capacity around grassroots and youth sports. And I was pretty impressed at what was put in front of me. And so I have had my team look at it, and we're going to look at how, with the assistance of Sports Pro and the partnership, we can help to develop this segment, or this sector in grassroots and the youth sector, the section of football in Africa. Now, we're not the governing body for football in Africa. It's called the Confederation of African Football. But we're coming in as a private company. This is the first sports solution and services company. And that's how we describe ourselves, as a sports solution and services company. So we work with partners, we work with stakeholders, we work with governing bodies and all of that to build capacity around various disciplines, and in particular football in this case. The Confederation of African Football is responsible for the sport of football on the continent. And but they definitely need partnerships, they need assistance, they need the help on many levels. The one thing that I know, what we know from our research before coming into, establishing this company, is that we lack a very poor, we lack a very robust private sector in the sports business in Africa. And that's where we come in, because it's not been there, to something that caters to commercialization, boosting the industry as a whole. One of the things I talked about in our last conference was the sports business is about some estimated about 600 to 700 billion dollars globally, and to soon reach $1 trillion mark in a few years. And then, of course, you have the peripheral effect that has on so many other sectors in an economy. But what is it that we can do to boost that, to get to that level to where Africa gets to start to earn, and not only just earn, but to grow the industry to be impactful in local as well as national economies and the continental economy. It starts with a game like football, which has a deep reach. It's football in Africa is a religion, just like it is within Europe and many other parts of the world. It's a religion, and people are so deeply vested in it. So developing the grassroots in the youth sector is of paramount importance. Now, the impact of what this has done, the pandemic has done to that sector, is devastating, just like I described the elite level, which you don't have anybody going to stadiums or playing games at this particular time. And that goes for the grassroots in the youth sector. Now, Africa's youth, looking at the continent in terms of demographics, Africa has 70% of its population. It's the youngest continent in the world. It's the youngest continent. 70% are below 35. And so there's a huge potential with the development of sports and an explosion in terms of opportunities for the young, and as well as for those in the sports business. So the idea is to come in post COVID-19 and look how we can leverage the sector on many levels. You talk about the system in India that's based on academies and things like that. Well, these are some of the intentions. These are some of the programs that we're putting in place in terms of trying to get a lot of African countries to have a functional academy that we will work with, and to help to develop talent and grow them, and to put them out there for play, not just for overseas, but within Africa itself. You have to develop the local ecosystem for those talents to be able to transcend that local ecosystem and go on to the international level. So it's been devastating. The pandemic has had a very adverse impact on the grassroots in the youth sector. So, but we're hopeful. We're actually very hopeful. We're hopeful. I mean, definitely there's encouraging news about testing with vaccines and potential medications that are around the corner. But we know definitely, you being a medical professional, you know definitely the turnaround on those things are not just like any other issue out there. It has to take time for testing, multiple testing, and about 12 to 18 months, kind of turnaround. So you definitely, this year is out of question, but we're hoping that by the time we turn the year into next year, we're looking at something very good, and for a kind of uplifting the youth sector and the grassroots sector as well for football. and with the assistance of SportsSeed Pro, I think we're in a good place.
Fine. So it is heartening to see that with the present challenge, you are looking beyond it, and you are trying to create your collaboration and bringing the game and the sports back much more than what is now. So
Yes.
going back to Arunavo, I'll just ask you to give an idea. How do you think that because of this present pandemic, that digitalization of football will be a real game changer in future?
Take an example of what we're doing at the moment. So it's happening. I think around the world. I think one of the biggest winners of the pandemic is the company called Zoom, whose platform we're using. So I think that is the biggest strength of digitalization. That we're sitting in different parts of the world. You're in India, Leslie's sitting in the US, I'm sitting in Germany, and we're able to communicate and speak to each other, exchange ideas, speak about how we can take things forward. And I think this cross communication, which is happening, is one of the positives, I would say, one of the few positives, if we've got a lot of negatives we have on the other side with the pandemic. Digitalization is one good thing, but on the other side is also a danger. I think that esports, for example, has been gaining quite a bit of traction. That's been in Europe one of the biggest problems for getting kids out to play sports. That esports has become a real competitor, that they rather stay indoors. And I take an example of let's say Formula One, where I've even seen some of these e-races with the real drivers, where you wouldn't realize what is the difference between a real race and an e-race. For those who are interested in analytics, in strategy, in scouting and other things, for them, this is a good time of actually going through a lot of data and a lot of content and having a look on, how you're going to improve, who are you looking for, rather rushing through the work. So I think this is, we've all slowed down a little bit, and that has helped as well. But on the other side, I think, with digitalization, of course, there's a lot of interaction with academies trying to reach kids, speaking to them, but you cannot replace those hours on a football field or on a sporting field or venue or wherever you are. So that is going to be a question, is that these months that the kids have lost, again, not only from a sporting perspective or football perspective, but also from an educational perspective, they will never get them back. And we need to ensure that that somehow is sort of taken care of, that that we don't have a lost generation because of this pandemic. And from that perspective, I think that that the positive effects of digitalization are there. It has forced a lot of companies, a lot of federation clubs, everyone to wake up to those realities and integrate digitalization into their plan. It's not just a social media plan of interacting with your fans or interacting with the people out there, but it's really, how do you communicate internally? How do you, develop your procedures and improve on them and make it better? And of course, is how do you get your information, your content out? All of that has certainly improved or is improving, and even with old age federations like like FIFA, like the confederations, like the big FAs in Europe, even for them this was a wake-up call, because you suddenly realize you don't need to travel to a Zurich or to a Kuala Lumpur or to a Nyon to the headquarters of the federations to have meetings, but you can do it also online, and you can get everyone on board.
Okay, so once I am coming to Leslie, I'll just once again go through that digital part, but I'll just request you one thing. Like Arunavo has mentioned that obviously digital is a good thing, but the physical component cannot be ruled out. But how you are planning to utilize the digital platform in terms of providing quality education, in terms of providing, suppose in future, evaluation, in terms of creating event? Are you planning something on the digital platform in future?
Yes, we are. Definitely, some of our projections and plans involve a significant and robust sports education platform. We need the personnel to support the sports industry. The sports industry is to grow. We definitely need the personnel for that. So So sports education platform is one of those, and it's continental based across something that's going to cut across the continent. We're looking at the number of partners to deliver those courses. The cost of access to the internet, which used to be very expensive, it's going down across Africa. So definitely we're very high on the fact that this will be a positive venture going forward. The thing also is that we're looking at a number of other things in terms of we also have the Africa Collegiate League, which we're starting, something which is along the lines of the NCAA in the United States. We are going to start which started this year in October, but we started in 2021. Instead, we'll push the full year back. We'll start with football. We'll start with 32 universities and then grow from that point. Definitely, you want to make sure, given the poor media ecosystem across Africa, in this case, we have a few partners on the ground who can deliver, but they will also intend on engaging through streaming to the content consumers, in this case, for those content that will be putting forward. For example, the Africa Collegiate League. And this, like we say, it's a collegiate, and so our target in this case is the student population across Africa, and that will definitely they know their way around technology. But one thing I can say though is, regardless of all the issues in Africa, the African sports space, we have the population, the demographic is coming up, the millennials and below, they are very tech savvy, and that I give to them, and so. We're very positive about what's in the future. What the COVID-19 pandemic has done to Africa in terms of opportunities and also the adoption of technology, digitalization, is that it's kind of like provided us a new platform to leapfrog into the future with sports and a number of other things, in this case, football. Delivery of content for football, whether it's a collegiate league or a local league, or whether it's an off field event involving the athletes themselves. We know we'll be able to get that content to the consumers out there who will be hungry to consume content such as that. So the digitalization for Africa, I think for us, it's a very what the pandemic has done is opened the eyes of most Africans, and which is our target market in this case. It's opened their perspectives to what's possible with technology. So it's about the future, not the now, that we're looking at. The future, the very near future, and the far future as well. So very, very, very many positives with that, and so we're looking at a number of things, OTT, delivery of content and things like that. So we're high on digitalization, and for example, we delivered our sports conference online, so which like you guys are doing right now. So very high on the impact of digitalization, this positive or negative, as it pertains to the COVID-19 pandemic.
So what we understand that COVID-19 has actually enhanced the speed of most probably digital transformation, and where everybody has to ultimately find out how to integrate the digitalization in a perfect way, keeping a balance so that the physical component of the game remains intact, and digitally it can be augmented, not taking away the physical part and promoting esports only entertainment through e-platform. So I'll just come to the last segment now to Arunabho. You being a football pundit and being a visionary in the field, how will you sum up that where we are heading and what can be a roadmap kind of a thing? We all know that things are not certain. We cannot definitely say these and these, but slightly like a long term and short term, how exactly we can move ahead as a roadmap.
I think the biggest problem, the biggest issue at the moment is that we are unclear of how this all will pan out. And I think that is the biggest problem for mankind, that we're in this uncertainty of not knowing how this pandemic will continue to develop. Is, for example, here in Europe, the first wave through, and we're not going to get a second wave? How will it affect a country like India, where it's still spreading at the moment, where the lockdown measures have been reduced? So the decision makers in football have the problem of, and that's not only for them, but if you look at politicians around the world, the same thing, is that the medical professionals will have to give an opinion about something which is very difficult to grasp. And to give an outlook is going to be difficult, because I fear, if I look at the Indian context, if I look at how the AFF at the moment is planning the new season and saying, okay, I'm pushing back my transfer window. I'm not even looking to start anything before September. I have to somehow get the second division either finished or somehow get someone promoted to the I-League before I can start the I-League, because my league system isn't complete because I haven't promoted anyone so far. Am I gonna relegate someone? No, I'm not. So that question at least is answered. Am I gonna be allowed to have fans at venues? Social distancing at Indian venues are going to be more difficult than in Europe. How are you going to organize training? So there are so many questions which have been difficult to answer in a very developed country like Germany, where I'd say, I guess the Germans, the Koreans, and the Japanese seem to be who've gone, and most probably Taiwan as well, and that's something which the Chinese won't like, but those are most probably the countries who've come best through this pandemic so far. India is a country of 1.3 billion. There is generally a lack of space. You have the daily wage earners who need to get back to work first. The question is, will sports be a priority for the government? And I don't think it will be, because for them, it's about ensuring that people survive. And if I see that clubs, professional football teams in Europe, who are normally owned either as people's clubs like we have here in Germany, or ownership structures, different ones like you have in Spain, in England, or France, or Italy, where you have rich owners behind them. The question is, how do you keep this whole puzzle working? Because at the moment, even the Champions League, European, the UEFA Champions League or the Europa League look very unrealistic, of teams traveling crisscross across Europe. And those questions need to be answered first. Is it safe? Does it make sense? What are the commercial implications? Because I was reading the other day the story about DAZN, who were expanding massively before the pandemic, and were trying to be the streaming platform around the world, putting a lot of focus on boxing, but also using their content in certain markets like Germany, Japan, Brazil in football. And they're now trying to sell one of their online platforms to just stay alive. So this is the question of who actually comes through this pandemic, survives, and is able to maintain himself or itself as a sporting body, and can take it forward. Because we might be in a situation that in certain countries there might be no football or no sports for the rest of the year.
So just moving ahead to Leslie for the last segment. Before I just hand you over the mic, I'll just put you two perspective here. Generally, it happens once we are in a tunnel and it is dark, we don't try to look ahead. We just try to focus on the feet. And the second thing is that once the bigger things are difficult, we generally fall back to basics so that we can hold it there in the ground, and so that the sports can survive, the game can survive. And once we overcome the thing, then everything will flourish. So keeping that in mind, Leslie, how you feel that the grassroots will be the changer in future for football?
Yeah, given the current dynamics, and like I said before, the demographics of Africa, having the youngest population in the world right now, and it's a potential to to be a feeder system for sports development in Africa. I think that's what everything is going to be predicated on, that the development of the future of football in Africa is going to be predicated on a robust grassroots development. As we're talking right now, like we say, everything is at a standstill. Africa is looking at coming out of this. Definitely, unlike a lot of developed parts of the world where there are bailouts for teams and bailouts for sports leagues, and Africa doesn't have that privilege. It doesn't have that opportunity. So we're looking at a very bleak future, but again, we have to fight through that and come out on the other end of this to get something going. So we're looking at how to obviously reset and come out of this and hit the ground running, which is going to be definitely challenging and difficult. But given the current dynamics of how sports is being administered and run in Africa, with limited commercialization, with limited media exposure, I think the impact coming out of this is not going to be so negative as such. So it's like Africa has an opportunity to come out of this in a better situation than it was before, because the space in itself was not that developed before now, and we're coming in to try to help with that going forward. But looking at the future of the game itself and how to leverage and using all the tools available to get the grassroots and the youth sector up and running, and being a support base as a supply chain of talents coming into the future. I think that's more or less where the work is going to be. In other words, that's where we need to focus and to push to make sure that we get football and the rest of sports in Africa up and running in a better situation than it was before. Lots of opportunities definitely coming out of this for a lot of people in the business space and the entrepreneurs, those who are entrepreneurs who are looking at opportunities in the sports space in Africa, because obviously this is a reset for a good number of things, even facility development and things like that. Those are all potential opportunities that are there across the continent, and the door is wide open. I mean, the opportunities are right. They're vast and they're there. Aurora just mentioned that India has a population of 1.3 billion. That's about the population of Africa as an entire continent, just about 1.3 billion people. But like I say, 70% of that is young. So we're looking at how best we can prepare these youngsters to be to have the opportunity to be substantive citizens going into the future, and them being a supporting cast or being the actual catalyst for change on many levels in the sports space, in football, and so many other ways as well.
So I just finished the spotlight segment here with renowned experts like Arunabha Chaudhary and Leslie Krumah, one from Germany and another from Africa, giving their perspective and the understanding. And we finished the total conclave today with a positive note that yes, we have faced this problem earlier through World War. Definitely, we will overcome it. Only thing is that at present, we have to do our basics correct. We have to modify, we have to accept the present, and we have to plan and execute to come through it. These changes will ultimately bring a lot of opportunity. So thanks a lot. Thanks a lot to both of you. And on behalf of the conclave, I really share our heartfelt gratitude to both of you to be part of this event. Thank you.